The field site I decided to choose was San Francisco, and more specifically Fisherman's Wharf, which are both located in Northern California. I chose this location due to my upcoming trip of going to California, more specifically Redwood City, with my mother, who is from Redwood City. We decided that San Francisco would be a interesting perspective due to Colorado being a landlocked state. I've always lived here. I've never really seen the interaction of a port city's culture. I've always kind of wondered if it was different, especially with, as I said, Colorado being a landlocked state. I've wondered how the trading is, the economy is, all of that, especially the culture that can be in a place like that on the coast with basically a open end to whoever wants to come. The history of San Francisco has been very amazing, to say the least. Being a history major, I have definitely looked into it, especially more for this project. The origins of it really are fishing, logging, trade routes, very high immigration rates from Asia, and then, of course, the settlement of Chinatown and all of that. A really large population brought out during the construction of the railroad in the 1800s. The city is in itself something that is a mesh of very different cultural heritages. There's very different districts that are all right next to each other, and they all seem to play nice with each other, especially when I was there. It seemed that some buildings were built in one style that you could tell was unique to that district, and other buildings were built in another style very unique to that district. A lot of the housing was right next to each other, touching each other. It seemed like they were trying to cram as many people as they could into that area. It's a very desirable area to live in, especially for the hub being right there of many companies and many businesses being in San Francisco. The streets there were very narrow, and the city is built on a lot of hills, and I did notice that a lot of the streets were named after, I would say, Californian heroes, a lot of people that were important to California history in some way or another. The weather when I was there was very cloudy to begin with, and a lot of natives, I would say, people who live in California, who grew up in San Francisco, wore coats and hats even though it was 60 degrees, and I was completely fine. I even got a sunburn that day, which was kind of ironic. One of the very cool things that we did do was we visited a lot of historical places. Of course, with me being a history major, I was very drawn to that. We visited Lombard Street, Palace of Fine Arts, the Golden Gate Bridge, and Coit Tower. There were quite a few people around those places, and you could definitely see and count out and point out who the tourists were, who the tourists were not. And of course, my mother growing up in California, she showed me the ropes of these places, and it was very neat to see the dynamic of what was going on in these places and how people were interacting with them. You could definitely see that people who had even lived in California had never been to these places and wanted to just eat up the history of San Francisco and of this specific area. Another really cool thing that we decided to do was to go up to an old military base out on the Presidio, and you could actually see where the guns were during World War II. Of course, they were removed now, but you could see where they were located, and it just really showed the deep historical culture because they decided to leave it there. It really showed that people in San Francisco and in this area really care about where they've been and what has happened in the area. And they really have this insight into history matters and culture matters and all of these arts matter. That's another thing. There was a lot of museums and all these different ads for all these museums inviting people saying this is when it's free, come and see all of these different works that all of these artists have. And it really just showed that people living in San Francisco and living in a port city have an appreciation for the arts that others have done. And after we decided to go to Fisherman's Wharf, that area was really quite different from other parts of San Francisco. There was a lot of shopping. It was more catered to the tourists of the area. While there was still some historical places, it was more fun, bright, light. There was a lot of people, a lot more. The people in that area were more up. They had their spirits higher. A lot of them were more dressed in, beach attire, that sort of thing, compared to being in San Francisco. Those people seemed to be on their way to work. They seemed to be more get down to it, but not in a way that was off-putting. They seemed like they knew what they were doing and they had goals in mind. While at Fisherman's Wharf, and more specifically Pier 39, it was more of a fun, light atmosphere. But there was still, of course, some people who seemed to have the same ideology that those in San Francisco did. One cool, fun thing that we did was we went to Pier 39 with all of the sea lions. The sea lions were fun. A lot of people actually traveled to San Francisco to see the sea lions, and they smelled terrible, but it was fun, and there was a lot of families around, and that was a really cool atmosphere. And one other thing about Pier 39 was that a lot of places were advertising ethical practices, which was really neat to see, whereas here in Colorado, we don't really advertise, oh, we ethically have this chicken or something like that. A lot of places in California, I suppose, and more specifically Fisherman's Wharf, were advertising ethical, which was really neat to see as a difference. And then during my interview with the server that we had at Cafe 8, I asked him what his name was, and his name was Luis. He's lived in California since he was 2. He was born in Mexico, and he moved to California to have a better life. I asked him, why do you think your parents sent you here? He said, the opportunities here are better, education-wise, work-wise, all of that. Have you always lived on the coast since you moved here? He stated, yes, living in Frisco may be expensive. However, it's worth it for the arts, people, and overall experience. Do you think the fishing and coastal arena influences people that interact here? He said, I 100% believe it. People come to the coast for the food and for a good time. Many people come to San Fran exclusively for how inclusive the city itself is. During Pride last month, the city lit up. The influence of the adoption of many peoples has been shown in the many different portions of the city, yet all of them coexist and feed into each other. What do you believe is the one common denominator within San Francisco? Love, acceptance, and the ability to choose. The city has always come together to rebuild after things. It's shown over and over in its history, and it's a common theme. In my time here, I've never met someone who's been on edge or shown anger. I like to think of this city as one that's busy, yet understand the ability to have it all and relax. After the interview with him, it was a really good lunch, and after that, I decided to take a look out at the fishing boats, and one of the really cool things was they have a church specifically just for the fishermen, and it really just drove home that point of love and acceptance that the city really had shown to me throughout the day. And I do truly believe that the city of San Francisco and the whole area, the whole Bay Area, is just an area that really wants to promote itself as accepting and to come and see, and that they have all these arts and all of these different things that you can come and see and learn about the history, but that it's a very progressive area. And it's very different from what I'm used to, yet in my time there, I felt like I wasn't 1,000 miles away. I felt completely at home. I felt completely accepted, and I felt that the people there are very tolerant, very nice, and that it's not just a very economically driven thing. I feel that walking away from my time there, that they really do actually care about promoting a culture of love and acceptance.